They wanted my business. Now they have a sentence.
They put me behind a giant pillar. Not beside it, not near it. Directly behind the massive marble column that blocked my view of everything except the back of some old lady's hat and a sliver of altar where my sister-in-law was about to marry the richest jerk in Millbrook County. "Perfect spot for you, Danny," my wife Jessica had said with that smile she reserves for waiters and parking attendants. "You'll have such a nice view of the architecture." Architecture, right. Like I cared one bit about Roman columns when I was missing my own family member's wedding ceremony. Well, technically Sarah wasn't my family yet, but after 12 years of marriage to Jessica, I figured I'd earned a seat with the humans. The pillar was cold against my shoulder as I leaned back, watching 200 guests in their designer clothes pretend to care about true love. Jessica sat 3 rows up with her parents, close enough that I could see her checking her phone every 30 seconds. Probably texting her boss again. Colin Matthews, senior partner at Harrison, Matthews and Associates, where my wife had been working late an awful lot lately. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the bride." Everyone stood except me. What was the point? I couldn't see anything anyway. The organ music swelled, and I heard the collective intake of breath that meant Sarah looked stunning. I wouldn't know. I was studying the veins in the marble like some kind of architectural expert. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." I turned to find a woman sliding into the empty seat beside me. Mid-30s, auburn hair, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost more than my truck payment. She had intelligent eyes and the kind of smile that suggested she found life amusing rather than disappointing. "You'd be right," I said, "though this pillar and I are becoming close friends." "Nina Walsh." She extended a manicured hand. "And you must be the infamous Danny." "Infamous? That's generous. Most people just go with Jessica's husband these days." "I prefer to think of you as the man who built half the custom homes in this county, but gets seated behind architectural features at family weddings." I studied her face. "Do I know you?" "We've never met, but I know your work. That house on Maple Ridge, the one with the wraparound porch and the stone foundation. Beautiful craftsmanship." For the first time in months, someone was talking to me about something I actually cared deeply about. "You live there?" I looked at it. Ended up buying the Peterson place instead, but I remember thinking, whoever built that house understood what a home should feel like. The ceremony continued somewhere beyond the pillar. I could hear the priest droning about love and commitment and all the things that apparently didn't apply to people who got seated in the cheap seats. "So what brings you to this circus?" I asked. Sarah's college roommate. "You? Married to the maid of honor? Lucky me." Nina glanced toward where Jessica sat with the wedding party. "The blonde in the pink dress? The one who keeps checking her phone. That's her. Probably coordinating some legal emergency that can't wait until after her own sister's wedding. Or texting someone she shouldn't be texting." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I looked at Nina more carefully. There was something in her voice, a certainty that made my stomach tighten. "What's that supposed to mean?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small device that looked like a garage door opener. "Danny, I'm going to ask you to trust me for about 30 seconds. Can you do that?" "Depends what you're planning to do with that thing." "Give you the best seat in the house." Before I could respond, she stood up and cleared her throat. Not loudly, but somehow the sound carried. A few people turned to look. "Excuse me," she said, her voice projecting clearly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something that everyone needs to see." The priest stopped mid-sentence. Sarah turned from the altar, her face confused. 200 guests shifted in their seats like a flock of birds sensing a predator. Nina held up the device. "This is a remote control for the projection system, the one they're using later for the slideshow of happy memories." She pressed a button. The massive screen behind the altar flickered to life. For a moment, there was just blue light. Then an image appeared that made the entire congregation gasp. It was Jessica, my wife, in Colin Matthews' office, sitting on his desk, with her skirt hiked up and her legs wrapped around his waist. The timestamp showed last Thursday, the day she told me she was working late on the Morrison case. The video had no sound, but it didn't need any. The way Colin's hands moved through her hair, the way she arched her back, the way they kissed like teenagers in the back seat of a car, it told the whole story. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Jessica shot to her feet, her face white as her sister's dress. Turn it off! Turn it off right now! But Nina wasn't done. She pressed the button again, and a new image appeared. Same office, different day. This time, Jessica was bent over Colin's desk while he stood behind her, both of them fully clothed, but the intent unmistakable. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, the night of our anniversary dinner that she'd canceled for a client emergency. The congregation erupted. People were standing, pointing, shouting. Sarah stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. The groom looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Danny!" Jessica screamed, pushing through the crowd toward me. "You son of a witch! How could you do this?" But I wasn't the one with the remote. I was still sitting behind the pillar, watching my marriage explode in high definition while 200 of Millbrook County's finest citizens got the show of their lives. Nina leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Now you have the best seat in the house." Jessica reached our row, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You planned this! You ruined Sarah's wedding!" "Actually," I said, standing up slowly, "I think you did that all by yourself." She swung at me. Actually swung. Her manicured nails aimed at my face like claws. I caught her wrist easily. 12 years of construction work versus 12 years of yoga classes wasn't much of a contest. "Let go of me!" "Gladly." I released her wrist and she stumbled backward, her heel catching in the hem of her dress. She went down hard, landing on her A in the center aisle, while her sister's wedding dress train pooled around her like spilled milk. The entire congregation was on their feet now, phones out, recording everything. This would be on social media before the reception started. I looked down at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting on the floor with her perfect hair mussed and her perfect makeup running. "You know what, Jessica? Thanks for the show, but I think I'll skip the reception." I stepped over her and walked toward the exit, Nina falling into step beside me. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Anywhere but here. You got a car?" "Black BMW in the parking lot." "Good. Because after that performance, I'm pretty sure my ride home just got canceled." Behind us, the chaos continued. Sarah was crying, the groom was trying to restore order, and Jessica was screaming threats that would probably get her disbarred if anyone took them seriously. But I didn't look back. For the first time in months, I was walking away from my problems instead of sitting behind them like some kind of architectural afterthought. The fresh air hit my face as we pushed through the church doors. Nina's BMW was exactly where she'd said it would be, gleaming black paint reflecting the late afternoon sun. "So," I said as we reached the car, "I'm guessing this wasn't exactly a chance encounter." She smiled and clicked the remote. The car chirped twice. "Get in, Danny. We need to talk." Nina's car smelled like leather and expensive perfume. She drove with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted a decision in her life, taking the back roads out of town while I tried to process what had just happened. "So," I said after we'd driven in silence for 10 minutes, "want to tell me who you really are?" "I told you, Nina Walsh. I'm a private investigator." "And you just happened to be at my sister-in-law's wedding with a remote control and video evidence of my wife screwing her boss?" "Nothing just happens, Danny. Someone hired me to document your wife's affair. The wedding was just convenient timing." I stared at her profile as she navigated a curve. "Who hired you?" "I can't tell you that. Client confidentiality." "Bees. Whoever hired you just blew up my marriage in front of half the county. I think I have a right to know." She pulled into the parking lot of Mickey's Tavern, a dive bar on the outskirts of town, where construction workers and truck drivers went to drink away their problems. It seemed appropriate. "Buy me a beer and I'll explain what I can." Mickey's was exactly what you'd expect. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of jukebox that still played Hank Williams Jr. We found a corner booth and ordered 2 Budweisers from a waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Carter administration. "Your wife's been having an affair for 8 months, Nina said without preamble. "Started right after Colin Matthews made senior partner. She's been using firm resources to cover her tracks, company credit card for hotel rooms, firm car for meetings that weren't really meetings." "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been following her for 6 weeks, taking pictures, documenting times and locations, building a case." "For who?" Nina took a long pull of her beer. "Someone who cares about you more than you realize." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting right now." The beer was cold and bitter. Exactly what I needed. Outside, the sun was setting over the parking lot, painting everything orange and red. Inside the church, they were probably still trying to figure out how to salvage Sarah's wedding. So what happens now? I asked. Now you decide what you want to do with the information. The information? Nina, you just broadcast my wife's infidelity to everyone we know. I think that decision's been made for me. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've got options. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Like what? Like whether you want to be the victim or the one who takes control of his life. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Text message from Jessica. We need to talk. Come home now. I showed Nina the screen. Subtle as always. Are you going? Eventually, but not because she told me to. Another buzz. This time it was my daughter Madison, home from college for the summer. Dad, what the heck happened? Mom's going crazy and Aunt Sarah is crying. Everyone's talking about some video. Crap. I typed back, I'll call you later. Are you okay? I'm fine, but Mom isn't. She's throwing things and screaming about lawyers. Stay out of her way. I'll be home soon. Nina watched me text. Kids? 1. Madison. She's 20, junior at Syracuse. Smart kid, but she's always been closer to her mother. That might change after today. Or she might blame me for humiliating her mother in public. Kids see more than parents think they do. If your wife's been having an affair for 8 months, your daughter probably suspected something. My phone rang. Jessica's ringtone, Gold Digger, by Kanye West. Madison had programmed it as a joke years ago, and I'd never bothered to change it. Now it seemed prophetic. I declined the call. You're going to have to face her eventually, Nina said. I know, but not yet. First, I want to understand what I'm walking into. Smart, your wife's a lawyer. She's probably already planning her defense strategy. Defense strategy? Think about it, Danny. You just publicly humiliated her at her sister's wedding. She's going to claim you violated her privacy, maybe even suggest you hired someone to stalk her. She'll make herself the victim. The phone rang again. This time I answered. What, Jessica? Don't you what me, you bastard? How could you do this to me? To Sarah, to our family? I didn't do anything to you. You did it to yourself. You hired that woman. You had me followed like some kind of criminal. Actually, I didn't, but I'm curious. Are you denying the affair? Silence on the other end. Then, come home. We'll discuss this privately like adults. Like adults? Jessica, you've been screwing your boss for 8 months. I think we're past the adult conversation stage. Danny, please, people are calling, texting, posting things online. Sarah's wedding is ruined. We need to figure out how to handle this. We? There is no we anymore. You made sure of that when you decided to use Colin's desk as your personal playground. I hung up and turned off the phone. Feel better? Nina asked. Actually, yeah, I do. Good, because it's about to get worse before it gets better. She was right, of course. Jessica was a lawyer, which meant she fought dirty and played to win. She'd already be planning her counterattack, figuring out how to spin this situation to her advantage. Tell me about Colin Matthews, I said. 45, divorced, no kids, made senior partner by billing more hours than anyone else in the firm. Drives a Mercedes, lives in that new development on the north side of town. Thinks he's God's gift to women in the legal profession. You've done your homework. It's what I do. He's also heavily in debt despite his income. Expensive tastes, bad investments. The kind of guy who needs a sugar mama more than he needs a mistress. Jessica makes good money, but she's not rich. No, but she's married to a successful contractor who owns valuable property and has a solid business. In a divorce, she'd get half of everything. The implications hit me like a cold slap. You think this affair was about money? I think Colin Matthews is the kind of man who sees opportunity everywhere. Your wife is attractive, successful, and married to a man with assets. If he could convince her to leave you, he'd get access to half my business and property. Exactly. I finished my beer and signaled for another. The bar was filling up with the usual Friday night crowd, guys like me who worked with their hands and drank to forget their problems. Except tonight, my problems had been broadcast in high definition to half the county. So, what's your advice, Nina? What would a professional investigator do in my situation? I'd be very careful about what I signed and what I agreed to. I'd document everything, and I'd make sure I had the best lawyer money could buy. Any recommendations? She smiled. Actually, yes. But first, there's something else you need to know. What now? Your wife's affair isn't just about love and money. There's a third party involved. Someone who's been helping them cover their tracks. Who? Someone close to you. Someone you trust. The second beer arrived. But suddenly, I didn't want it. Nina, just tell me. Your business partner, Frank Morrison, he's been providing alibis, covering for meetings that weren't really meetings. He's in on it. Frank Morrison, my oldest friend, my business partner for 15 years. The guy who'd stood up at my wedding, who'd helped me build my company from nothing, who knew every detail of my financial life. You're sure? I have photos of him meeting with Colin Matthews, phone records showing calls between them, credit card receipts for dinners where they discussed how to handle the Danny situation. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Jessica cheating was bad enough, but Frank? Frank was supposed to be my friend, my partner, my brother in everything but name. Why? I asked. Money. Colin promised him a piece of the action if he helped break up your marriage. Frank's been struggling financially. His gambling problem is worse than you know. Colin offered him a way out. I sat back in the booth, trying to process this new information. My wife, my business partner, and her boss had been conspiring against me for months, planning my downfall while I sat behind pillars at family weddings, oblivious to the knife sliding between my ribs. Danny? Nina's voice seemed to come from far away. You okay? No, I said. I'm really not. But even as I said it, I felt something else building inside me. Something cold and hard and focused. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. If they thought they could destroy my life and walk away clean, they were about to learn otherwise. Nina, I said, I want to hire you. To do what? To help me destroy them before they destroy me. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it wasn't a pleasant expression. Now you're talking. I went home that night, but not to Jessica. Instead, I drove to the construction site, where we were building a custom home for the Hendersons. It was nearly finished, just some trim work and final inspections left. I'd been working on this house for 4 months, and it was some of my best work. Traditional colonial with modern touches, the kind of place where a family could build a life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I parked my truck next to the job trailer and sat in the darkness, thinking about Frank Morrison. We'd started Morrison and Sullivan Construction 15 years ago with nothing but a pickup truck, some borrowed tools, and more ambition than sense. We'd built it into one of the most respected residential contractors in the county. Now I found out he'd been planning to sell me out for gambling money. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading most. Jessica, Madison, my mother-in-law, Sarah, various friends and relatives who'd witnessed the wedding disaster. The whole county would be talking about it by morning. One message caught my attention. It was from Tom Bradley, who owned Bradley's Hardware and had been supplying materials for my jobs for 10 years. Danny, saw what happened at the wedding. If you need anything, call me. Some things are more important than business. Another one from Maria Santos, whose kitchen I'd renovated last year. Mr. Sullivan, I don't know what's going on with your personal life, but you are a good man and an honest contractor. Don't let anyone tell you different. For every message of support, there were 2 from people wanting gossip or details. Small town life, your business became everyone's entertainment. I was about to put the phone away when it rang. Madison. Dad, where are you? At the Henderson job site. Are you okay? I'm fine, but Mom's not. She's been crying and screaming and throwing things. She broke the lamp you made her for Christmas. The lamp had taken me 3 weeks to build. Custom woodwork with a stained glass shade Madison had designed. Jessica had claimed to love it. I'm sorry you had to see that, sweetheart. Dad, what really happened today? Mom says you hired someone to spy on her, but that doesn't sound like you. Smart kid. She'd inherited her mother's intelligence, but thankfully seemed to have gotten my sense of right and wrong. Your mother's been having an affair with her boss. Someone documented it and showed the evidence at the wedding, but it wasn't me who hired them. Silence on the other end. Then, how long? 8 months, apparently. That explains a lot. She's been different lately. Secretive, always on her phone, working late all the time. I thought maybe she was planning to surprise you for your anniversary or something. She surprised me, all right. Dad, I'm sorry. This sucks. Yeah, it does. But we'll figure it out. Are you coming home tonight? I looked at the house I'd been building, solid and straight and true. Everything my marriage wasn't. Not tonight. I need some time to think. Are you safe there? Yeah, Mom's locked herself in the bedroom. She's on the phone with someone, probably her lawyer. Probably. Madison, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it doesn't change anything between us. You're the best thing I ever did, and I love you. I love you too, Dad. And for what it's worth, I think Mom's an idiot. After we hung up, I sat in the truck for another hour, watching the stars come out over the half-finished house. Then I drove to the Comfort Inn on Route 9 and got a room for the night. It wasn't much. Generic furniture, thin walls, and a view of the parking lot. But it was mine. I called Nina. How did it go at home? She asked. I didn't go home. I'm at the Comfort Inn. Smart. Give her time to panic. My daughter says Jessica's already talking to lawyers. Of course she is. She's trying to control the narrative, make herself the victim. By tomorrow morning, she'll have a story about how you violated her privacy and humiliated her family. Will it work? Depends on how smart your lawyer is. Speaking of which, I have that recommendation I mentioned. I'm listening. Patricia Chen. She handles high-asset divorces and she doesn't lose. More importantly, she hates cheating spouses. Can you set up a meeting? Already did. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Her office is on Main Street, above the coffee shop. You work fast. I told you, Danny. This is what I do. The next morning, I met Patricia Chen in her surprisingly modest office. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with short black hair and the kind of intense focus that made you sit up straight. Mr. Sullivan, I've reviewed the preliminary information Ms. Walsh provided. Your situation is complicated but not hopeless. Meaning? Meaning your wife made mistakes, big ones. Using firm resources for personal affairs, potentially exposing the law firm to liability, conducting her relationship in ways that could be documented. These things give us leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that keeps you from losing everything you've worked for. Tell me about your business. I spent an hour explaining Morrison & Sullivan Construction. Our contracts, properties, equipment, financial situation. Patricia took notes and asked sharp questions that made me realize how much I'd trusted Frank with over the years. Your business partner's involvement complicates things, she said finally. If he's been working with your wife's lover to undermine your marriage, that could constitute fraud. What does that mean for me? It means we might be able to dissolve the partnership and recover damages. But first, we need more evidence. Nina mentioned she has photos and phone records. That's a start. But I want to know exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. How much money has your partner taken? What promises were made? Who else is involved? How do we find that out? Patricia smiled, and I understood why Nina had recommended her. We set a trap. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Patricia would have her assistant call Frank, claiming to represent a potential client who wanted to hire Morrison & Sullivan for a major renovation project. The catch was that the client specifically wanted to work with Frank, not me, based on a referral from Colin Matthews. If Frank took the meeting without telling me, it would prove he was already planning to cut me out of the business. If he mentioned it to Colin, it would confirm their ongoing relationship. What if he's innocent? I asked. What if Nina's wrong about him? Then he'll tell you about the potential client and suggest you both meet with them. But if he's guilty, he'll see this as an opportunity to start his new life without you. The meeting was set for Tuesday afternoon. That gave me the weekend to figure out how to handle Jessica and the fallout from the wedding disaster. I didn't have to wait long. Saturday morning, I got a call from my lawyer, not Patricia, but Jim Walsh, the guy who'd handled my business contracts for years. Danny, I got a call from Jessica's attorney. They want to meet. About what? About settling this quietly before it gets uglier. They're claiming you violated her privacy and caused intentional emotional distress. They want you to sign a statement taking responsibility for the wedding incident. In exchange for what? A favorable divorce settlement. You keep the business, she keeps the house and her retirement accounts. Clean split, no alimony. It sounded reasonable, which meant it was probably a trap. Jim, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Have you talked to Frank Morrison about any of this? Silence on the other end. Then, Danny, I think you should consider the offer. It's generous under the circumstances. That's not what I asked. Frank's concerned about the business. This kind of publicity could hurt your reputation, cost you contracts. Maybe it's better to settle quickly and move on. Frank had gotten to him too. My lawyer, my business partner, probably half the people I'd considered friends. They all thought I should just roll over and let Jessica and Colin have what they wanted. Jim, you're fired. Danny, don't be hasty. I hung up and called Patricia Chen. They're moving faster than I expected, she said after I explained the situation. That tells me they're scared. Scared of what? Of what else we might find. Your wife's affair is embarrassing, but it's not illegal. If they're this eager to settle, there's something bigger they're trying to hide. Like what? Like embezzlement. Like fraud. Like a conspiracy to steal your business and assets. We need to accelerate our timeline. What do you want me to do? Go home. Act like you're considering their offer. And whatever you do, don't let on that you suspect your business partner. We need him to feel safe enough to make a mistake. Going home was harder than I'd expected. The house looked the same from the outside. Colonial revival with a wraparound porch, custom stonework, professional landscaping. I'd built it myself, every board and nail placed with care. It was supposed to be our forever home. Now it felt like a crime scene. Jessica was waiting in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe despite it being nearly noon. She looked like she'd been crying, but with Jessica, appearances were always strategic. Danny, thank God you're home. We need to talk. I'm listening. This whole thing is insane. Yes, I made a mistake with Colin. Yes, I should have been honest with you. But what happened at the wedding was cruel and humiliating. For who? For everyone. For me, for you, for Sarah. Our marriage problems shouldn't have been made public like that. I sat down at the kitchen table I'd built from reclaimed barnwood. Jessica, you've been lying to me for 8 months. You've been using firm resources to cover up your affair. You've been planning to leave me for a man who sees you as a stepping stone to my money. Exactly which part of that should have stayed private? I never said I was leaving you for Colin. Didn't you? She looked away, which was answer enough. Danny, I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems, rebuild what we had. What we had was a marriage. What you had was a side business. Don't be cruel. Cruel? Jessica, you humiliated me for months. You made me feel like I was losing my mind, questioning my own perceptions. You gaslit me every time I asked why you were working late or why you were always on your phone. And now you want to talk about cruel? She started crying then, real tears this time. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Danny. I never meant for it to go this far. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost felt the old urge to comfort her, to fix whatever was broken between us. Then I remembered Frank and Colin and the conspiracy to destroy my life. How long have you been planning to take half my business? The tears stopped. What? Frank's been talking to Colin about the Danny situation. They've been planning how to handle my reaction to your affair. How long have you known about that? I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Colin needs money, you need a divorce settlement, and Frank needs to pay off his gambling debts. My business and property solve everyone's problems except mine. Jessica stood up, her face flushing red. You're being paranoid. Am I? Then why is your lawyer offering me such a generous settlement? Why is Jim Walsh suddenly concerned about my reputation? Why is everyone so eager to make this go away quietly? Because we're trying to minimize the damage to everyone involved. No, Jessica, you're trying to cover up a conspiracy to defraud me. But here's the thing. I'm not the same guy who sat behind the pillar at Sarah's wedding. That guy was willing to be ignored and dismissed and treated like furniture. This guy fights back. I stood up and headed for the door. Where are you going? To take control of my life. Something I should have done months ago. Danny, wait, please. Can't we at least try to work this out? I stopped at the door and looked back at her. She was beautiful, successful, intelligent, everything I'd thought I wanted in a wife. But she was also calculating, manipulative, and willing to destroy me for her own benefit. Jessica, if you'd come to me 8 months ago and said you were unhappy, that you wanted a divorce, that you'd found someone else, I would have been hurt, but I would have respected your honesty. We could have ended this like adults. It's not too late. Yeah, it is. Because this isn't about an affair anymore. This is about you and Colin and Frank trying to steal everything I've worked for. And that's not a marriage problem. That's a crime. I left her standing in the kitchen of the house I'd built, crying real tears for the first time in months. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fear. Because she finally understood that the man she'd been betraying wasn't going to disappear quietly into the night. Tuesday afternoon, I sat in my truck across the street from Mickey's Tavern, watching Frank Morrison shake hands with a woman in an expensive suit. According to Nina, the woman was Patricia Chen's assistant, playing the role of a potential client interested in a major renovation project. The meeting had lasted 45 minutes, long enough for Frank to pitch his services, discuss timelines and pricing, and, if he was guilty, to explain why he'd be a better choice than his current partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. Got it all on audio. He's dirty. I waited until Frank left before going into the bar. Patricia's assistant was still there, packing up her briefcase and looking satisfied with her performance. How bad is it? I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Pretty bad. He spent 20 minutes explaining why Morrison Construction would be a better choice than Morrison and Sullivan. Said his current partner was going through some personal issues that might affect the quality of work. Did he mention Colin Matthews? Oh, yes. Said Mr. Matthews had recommended him specifically, and that they'd been discussing a potential partnership once some current complications were resolved, meaning once I was out of the picture. That's certainly how I interpreted it. He also mentioned that he'd be able to offer better pricing without having to split profits with a partner. I felt sick. Frank Morrison, my oldest friend, the guy who'd helped me build my business from nothing, was already planning my funeral. Did he sign anything? A preliminary agreement for a consultation next week? He seemed very eager to move forward. That evening, I met with Patricia and Nina at Patricia's office. The audio recording was incriminating. Frank's voice, clear and confident, explaining how he planned to rebrand the business and take on new partners once he was free of his current obligations. This is fraud, Patricia said after we'd listened to the entire recording. He's using your business reputation and client relationships to secure contracts for himself. In legal terms, he's breaching his fiduciary duty as your partner. What's my next move? We document everything. Bank records, client contracts, any communications between Frank and Colin. Then we confront them with evidence and see how they react. You mean give them a chance to explain? Nina laughed. She means give them a chance to hang themselves. Patricia nodded. People who think they're getting away with something tend to get overconfident. If we approach this right, they'll incriminate themselves further. How? By making them think they've won. The plan was elegant and cruel. I would call Frank and tell him I was considering Jessica's settlement offer. I'd say I was tired of fighting, tired of the publicity, ready to move on. I'd suggest we meet to discuss the future of the business. Maybe he could buy out my share, take over the contracts, keep the Morrison name. If Frank was innocent, he'd be surprised and try to talk me out of making a hasty decision. If he was guilty, he'd jump at the chance to get what he'd been planning to steal. I made the call that night from my hotel room. Danny, thank God you called. I've been worried about you. Yeah, well, it's been a rough few days. I can imagine. Listen, I know this is hard, but maybe it's for the best. You and Jessica have been having problems for a while. Interesting. I'd never discussed my marriage problems with Frank. How did he know we'd been having issues? You think so? Come on, Danny. She's been working late constantly. You've been spending more time at job sites than at home. The writing's been on the wall. I guess you're right. Anyway, I'm thinking about taking Jessica's settlement offer. Clean break, move on with my life. That sounds smart. What about the business? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I'm thinking maybe I should sell you my half, let you take over. I could use the money for a fresh start somewhere else. Silence on the other end, then, are you serious? Yeah, I mean, after all this publicity, my reputation's shot anyway. Might be better if Morrison Construction was just Morrison Construction. Danny, if that's what you want, I'd be honored to carry on what we built together. What we built together. Right. Can you meet tomorrow? Maybe we can work out the details. Absolutely. How about lunch at Mickey's? Noon? Perfect. And Frank? Thanks for being such a good friend through all this. It means a lot to know I can count on you. Always, Danny. Always. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. He took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He's already talking about carrying on what we built together. Excellent. Tomorrow's meeting will be very interesting. The next day, I arrived at Mickey's 15 minutes early and took a corner booth where Nina could set up surveillance equipment. She'd positioned herself at the bar with a clear view of our table and audio equipment that could pick up conversations from 50 feet away. Frank arrived exactly on time. Looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. He was actually smiling as he slid into the booth across from me. Danny, I have to say, you're handling this whole situation with a lot of class. A lot of guys would be bitter about the wife thing. What's the point of being bitter? Jessica's made her choice. Now I have to make mine. Smart attitude. So it's about the business. I've been thinking about your offer, and I think I can make it work. I've got some investors interested in backing an expansion. Investors? Yeah. Some guys I know who see the potential in what we've built. They think Morrison Construction could be a major player in the regional market. Anyone I know? Frank hesitated for just a moment. Mostly financial guys. You wouldn't know them. What about Colin Matthews? Didn't you mention he was interested in real estate investments? Another hesitation, longer this time. We've talked a few times. He thinks there's opportunity in the residential market. I bet he does, especially with Jessica's connections in the legal community. A lot of lawyers need custom homes. Exactly. See, you always were the smart one, Danny. You see the big picture. I was starting to understand why Patricia Chen didn't lose cases. Frank was digging his own grave with every word. So what kind of timeline are we talking about? Well, I'd need to have the paperwork drawn up, get the financing arranged. Maybe a month to finalize everything? That works. Gives me time to figure out where I want to relocate. You're really leaving Millbrook? Frank, after what happened at the wedding, I don't think I can stay. Everyone's going to be talking about this for years. Yeah, that was pretty brutal. I felt bad for you sitting there while that video played. You were there? Frank's face went white. I mean, I heard about it. People were talking. But I'd seen the guest list. Frank Morrison wasn't invited to Sarah's wedding. The only way he could have known the details was if someone who was there had told him. Someone like Colin Matthews. Right, people talk. Danny, I hope you know I'm on your side in all this. Whatever Jessica did, it wasn't right. I appreciate that. It's good to know who your real friends are. We spent another 20 minutes working out preliminary details. Frank would get the business appraised, arrange financing, draw up a purchase agreement. I would stay on as a consultant for 6 months to help with the transition. It was all very civilized and friendly. Two old friends working out a business deal that benefited everyone. Except Frank kept making small mistakes. He knew too much about Jessica's affair, too many details about the wedding incident, too much about Colin Matthews' financial situation. He was trying to sound supportive while barely containing his excitement about finally getting what he'd been planning to steal. After he left, Nina joined me in the booth. Well, he's guilty as heck and stupid enough to prove it. The recording should be very interesting. That evening, Patricia played back the audio in her office. It was even more incriminating than I'd expected. Frank had essentially confessed to planning my removal from the business, detailed his relationship with Colin Matthews, and revealed knowledge he couldn't possibly have unless he'd been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. This is enough to dissolve the partnership and recover damages, Patricia said. But I think we can do better. Better how? By getting them to commit to paper. Frank's going to draw up a purchase agreement based on fraudulent information. Colin's going to provide financing based on assets he expects to acquire through your divorce. Jessica's going to sign off on a settlement that assumes you'll have money from selling your business. And then we spring the trap. We reveal that we know about the conspiracy, void all the agreements, and file criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. Criminal charges? Danny, they didn't just plan to cheat on you. They planned to steal your business, your property, and your future. That's not a civil matter. That's organized crime. I sat back in my chair trying to process the implications. My wife, my business partner, and her lover hadn't just betrayed me personally. They'd committed felonies. How long do we wait? Until they're fully committed. Until they've signed documents and transferred money and made promises they can't take back. Then we destroy them all at once. Nina smiled. I love a good takedown. How long? I asked again. Patricia checked her calendar. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Maybe long enough for them to think they've won. And then, Danny, you get to watch your enemies destroy themselves. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I felt something like hope. Not just for revenge, but for justice. These people had tried to steal my life, but they'd underestimated who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some blue-collar guy who could be pushed around and discarded. I was a man who built things to last, who planned for the long term, who understood that the strongest foundations were the ones you couldn't see. And I was about to teach them all a lesson about what happened when you tried to tear down something I'd built. 3 weeks later, everything was in place. Frank had signed a purchase agreement for my half of the business, using financing arranged through Colin Matthews' investment group. Jessica had agreed to a divorce settlement that assumed I'd have liquid assets from the business sale. Colin had personally guaranteed the loan, putting up his own property as collateral. They thought they were so clever, these three conspirators. They'd planned every detail, covered every angle, anticipated every obstacle. Except one. They'd underestimated me. The confrontation was set for Friday afternoon at the Morrison and Sullivan office, a converted warehouse where we'd run our business for 15 years. Patricia had arranged for a sheriff's deputy to be present, ostensibly to witness the signing of documents, but actually to arrest anyone who tried to flee. I arrived first, followed by Nina and Patricia. Then Jessica showed up with her lawyer, a slick guy named Richard Stone, who specialized in high-asset divorces. Frank came next, practically bouncing with excitement about finally owning the business outright. Colin Matthews was the last to arrive, carrying a briefcase full of financing documents and wearing the smug expression of a man who thought he'd just pulled off the perfect crime. "Well," Frank said, rubbing his hands together, "I guess we're all here. Should we get started?" "Absolutely," Patricia said. "But first, I think everyone should understand exactly what they're signing." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Morrison, you're purchasing your partner's share of a business based on financial statements and asset valuations. Are those statements accurate?" "Of course they are." "And Mr. Matthews, you're providing financing based on your assessment of the business's value and Mr. Morrison's ability to repay the loan. Is that correct?" "That's right." "And Mrs. Sullivan, you're agreeing to a divorce settlement that assumes your husband will have approximately $400,000 in liquid assets from this business sale. Is that your understanding?" Jessica nodded. "That's what we agreed to." "Excellent. Then everyone understands the terms." Patricia smiled. "Now let me explain why none of these agreements are worth the paper they're printed on." She opened the folder and spread photographs across the conference table. Photos of Frank meeting with Colin, photos of Jessica and Colin together, photos of all three of them at various meetings over the past 2 months. For the past 8 weeks, I've been documenting a conspiracy to defraud Daniel Sullivan of his business, his property, and his future. What you see here is evidence of that conspiracy. Frank's face went white. "What the heck is this?" "This, Mr. Morrison, is proof that you've been planning to steal your partner's business while pretending to be his friend. You've been meeting with Mr. Matthews to arrange financing, knowing that the money would ultimately come from assets you expected to acquire through Mrs. Sullivan's divorce. That's not... It's all documented, Frank. Dates, times, locations, recordings of your conversations, including your meeting last week where you discussed how to handle Danny if he became suspicious." Colin Matthews stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," Patricia said calmly, "because you're about to be arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud." "You can't prove anything." "Can't I?" She pulled out another folder. "Bank records showing payments from your investment group to Mr. Morrison before any agreements were signed. Phone records showing hundreds of calls between you and Mrs. Sullivan during business hours. Credit card receipts for hotel rooms and dinners that weren't business expenses." Jessica's lawyer was frantically taking notes. "This is all circumstantial. Mr. Stone, your client has been using firm resources to conduct an extramarital affair while planning to defraud her husband. I'd be less concerned about my evidence and more concerned about her potential disbarment." The room went silent. Then Jessica started crying, not the strategic tears she'd used at home, but the desperate sobs of someone who realized her life was falling apart. "Danny, please, we can work this out. We can what, Jessica? Go back to the way things were? Pretend you didn't spend 8 months planning to destroy me. I never wanted to hurt you. No. You just wanted to steal everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing." Frank was staring at the photographs, his face gray. "Danny, you have to understand, I was in a bad spot. I owed money to some dangerous people. Colin offered me a way out by betraying your oldest friend. I thought you'd be okay. You're tough, you're smart, you'd land on your feet. While you stole my business, and my wife stole my property." Colin Matthews had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "This is all very dramatic, but you can't prove intent to defraud. We were making legitimate business arrangements. Were you?" Patricia pulled out a final document. Because this is a recording of your conversation with Mrs. Sullivan 3 days ago, where you discussed how to hide assets from the divorce proceedings. She pressed play on a small digital recorder. Colin's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Once Danny signs the business sale, we can move the money offshore. The Cayman account is already set up. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll be long gone. Jessica's voice responded, "What about Frank? He'll want his cut." "Frank's got a habit. He'll blow through his money in 6 months and be back where he started. We'll be in Costa Rica, living like royalty." The recording continued for another 5 minutes, detailing their plans to flee the country with my money, leaving Frank to face the consequences alone. Frank stared at Colin with undisguised hatred. "You son of a witch! You were going to leave me holding the bag! Frank, I can explain." "Explain what? How you were going to steal Danny's money and disappear while I went to prison for fraud? Nobody was going to prison. It was just business." "Just business?" I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. "You destroyed my marriage, corrupted my business partner, and planned to steal everything I'd worked for. And you call it business?" Colin backed toward the door. "Danny, be reasonable. We can still work something out." "The only thing I want to work out is how long you spend in jail." Patricia nodded to the sheriff's deputy, who stepped forward with handcuffs. "Colin Matthews, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and theft by deception." "This is insane. I'm a respected attorney. You're a criminal who used your law degree to plan sophisticated thefts." The handcuffs worked the same way. As Colin was led away in handcuffs, Frank slumped in his chair. "Danny, I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I was desperate, and I made the worst decision of my life." "You made a lot of decisions, Frank. Every one of them was a choice to betray me." "I know, and I'll have to live with that." "No, Frank, you'll have to live with that in prison. You're under arrest too." The second deputy stepped forward, and Frank didn't resist as they cuffed him. He just looked at me with sad, defeated eyes. "For what it's worth, Danny, you were the best friend I ever had. I'm sorry I wasn't the same for you." Jessica was still crying, but now she was looking at me with something like fear. "Danny, what happens to me?" "That depends on how cooperative you are with the district attorney. You're facing disbarment, criminal charges, and a divorce settlement that leaves you with nothing." "Nothing? You tried to steal my business, my property, and my future. Did you really think I'd let you keep the house and your retirement accounts?" Patricia opened another folder. "Mrs. Sullivan, your husband is filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. Under state law, that means you're entitled to nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no shared assets." "But the prenup you had your husband sign 15 years ago? The one that protects your assets in case of divorce? It contains a morality clause that voids all protections if you commit adultery or fraud. You wrote it yourself, remember?" Jessica stared at the document, her face white. She'd been so focused on stealing my assets that she'd forgotten about the legal protection she'd insisted on when we got married. "I'll be homeless. You'll be exactly what you tried to make me," I said. "Alone and broke and starting over." The deputies led Frank and Colin away. Jessica's lawyer was already on his phone, probably trying to find her a criminal defense attorney. Jessica sat in her chair, staring at the ruins of her carefully planned conspiracy. "Danny," she said quietly, "I know you hate me now, but we had some good years. That meant something, didn't it?" I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in months, she was still beautiful, still intelligent, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. But she was also a stranger who'd been willing to destroy me for money. "Yeah, Jessica, it meant something. That's what makes this so much worse." I walked out of the office, leaving her sitting alone at the conference table where we'd just destroyed 3 lives and ended a 15-year business partnership. Outside, Nina was waiting by her beam. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Empty, relieved, angry, sad." I shrugged, like I just watched my old life die. "That's because you did. But now you get to build a new one. Any suggestions? Start with figuring out who you want to be when you're not defined by other people's betrayals." Patricia emerged from the building, looking satisfied with her day's work. "The district attorney is very interested in this case. Colin and Frank will probably get 5 to 10 years each. Jessica might avoid prison if she cooperates, but her legal career's over. And me? You get to keep everything: the business, the house, the property, the retirement accounts. plus damages from Frank's breach of fiduciary duty and Jessica's fraud. So I won. You survived. Whether you won depends on what you do next. That evening, I sat on the porch of the house I'd built, drinking a beer and watching the sun set over the mountains. Madison was inside, packing her things to go back to college early. She'd decided she didn't want to spend the rest of the summer watching her parents' marriage decompose in public. Dad? She came out and sat beside me. Are you okay? I will be. I'm sorry about Mom and Frank and all of it. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. What happens now? I thought about that question. What did happen now? I had my business back, but I'd have to rebuild it without Frank. I had my house, but it felt empty without a family to fill it. I had my freedom, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Now I figure out how to build a life instead of just surviving one. That sounds good, Dad. You deserve to be happy. So do you. Don't let what happened between your mother and me make you cynical about love and marriage. I won't, but I will be more careful about who I trust. That's probably smart. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the valley. Tomorrow, the newspapers would run stories about the conspiracy that had rocked Millbrook County's legal and business communities. There would be more interviews, more legal proceedings, more public attention. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt at peace. I'd been betrayed by the three people I'd trusted most in the world. I'd lost my wife, my business partner, and my faith in human nature. But I'd also learned something important about myself. I was stronger than I'd thought, smarter than they'd assumed. And when pushed to the wall, I could fight back with devastating effectiveness. They'd tried to destroy me, but they'd only made me harder to end. And in the end, that made all the difference. 3 months later, I was rebuilding Morrison Construction as Sullivan Custom Homes. Nina had become my business partner, bringing her investigative skills and business connections to help us land high-end clients who valued discretion and quality. Jessica was working as a paralegal in Albany, the only legal job she could find after her disbarment. Colin was serving 8 years in federal prison for fraud and money laundering. Frank got 6 years and was spending his time in minimum security, probably planning his next get-rich-quick scheme. I still lived in the house I'd built, but now it felt like home again instead of a crime scene. Madison visited on weekends, and we were closer than we'd ever been. She'd learned some hard lessons about trust and betrayal, but she'd also seen that good people could survive bad situations if they were willing to fight for themselves. The wedding pillar incident had become local legend, the day Danny Sullivan turned the tables on everyone who'd underestimated him. People still talked about it at Mickey's Tavern and Bradley's Hardware, but now the story had evolved into something like admiration. He'd been counted out, written off, dismissed as just another blue-collar guy who'd married above his station. But when the chips were down, he'd outthought, outmaneuvered, and outlasted 3 college-educated professionals who'd thought they were smarter than him. It was a good story. And for the first time in my life, I was proud to be the hero instead of the victim. They'd put me behind a pillar and expected me to disappear. Instead, I'd used it as cover while I planned their destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is just refusing to be the person other people expect you to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very smart, you get to watch your enemies destroy themselves while you build something better from the wreckage of your old life.